Hello. In the last video, we got some rocks able to spawn and pick some random directions to rotate and move in. So that's what we got going on. And we have rocks that can fly up and get stuck on the edges. So we have rocks, some graphics we haven't used, and the rocks are all getting stuck on the edges. So there's a number of problems here. Number one, it says we have 0 rocks, but we have 3. So we created a variable to count rocks, but we never started counting rocks. So when I start as a clone, let's change the number of rocks by 1. So now we'll get 3 rocks. So that fixes that. Now we have 3 rocks. Another thing that I did is I forgot to reset the costume. So when it gets clicked, we should be switching costume to Rock 1. So that's something that we shouldn't make the assumption on. So that gets that set up. So we have the point where it starts, it creates clones, it creates the 3 clones, and it's doing it very politely. So maybe a little too politely. So we have it going to random positions and then making sure that those positions are not on top of the ship. So we're not going to want it to stay this way, because the only time we create a clone, we're not going to want it to be polite. So when we shoot a rock, it's going to create some clones, and we don't want it to be polite at that point. So this is probably in the wrong place. So let's get that working properly first. So we're going to change when I receive start. So let's go to control. Let's get a repeat. So we're going to repeat 3 times. And this can be a variable that gets adjusted for levels. So if we go far enough that we're actually making levels, we might want to change the way that this works. So we're going to go to random position. And instead of sending the clones to random positions, we're going to send the original to a random position, have it clone itself 3 times, then do these things. But we'll need to move show, because show needs to be when I start as a clone. So we'll get rid of these as being unnecessary. Now it will make 3 versions of itself. Let's move things around. Let's keep show somewhere. So when I start as a clone, we'll do these things. Well, when we start, we'll create 3 clones. They're all hidden. So I'd imagine that show should probably go here. That will apply to any clones, even though some of the clones will already be showing, but that's okay. So let's see that that's working and does the same thing. So it creates the clones. They're going to be polite. Are they still going in random directions? Everything looks like it's working right now. So that's good. So now we need to deal with all of the rocks are getting stuck on the edge. So we have a costume for that. It's the big costume. So the big costume is to make it so when they get to an edge, they can go all the way off the edge. So if we watch what happens, we can see them stuck on the edges because they can't go all the way off. And perhaps they can go far enough. Perhaps that's far enough. or perhaps not. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a circle. We'll use shift so it's a perfect circle, and we'll go around the size of the rock. So what that gets us is we can see the biggest side of the rock. Let's make this show. Why is our rock not showing? There we go. Now we can see the rock. So let's get the rotation here to 90. So we'll start at the default rotation and we'll find our X value. So we can see the biggest part of the rock. It's around 266 when it's just touching the edge. Let's go with 270. So we'll go over into code. We'll just get an operator. So we'll use greater than. We'll duplicate that. Let's go up here so we can get X position and Y position, just to put them right here. That way we can have the visual reminder. So 270, we'll call this side as being off of the edge. Then we'll take this, let's rotate it so it's this way, and then we'll take it up to the top. We'll just adjust it until it's just on the edge. We get a 204. So we could call that, I don't know, let's just go up a little more. Let's call it 210. 210 would be completely off of the edge. We'll just move that over there. We'll go 210. 210 is off of the other edge on its biggest side. So let's go back to the costume, and we'll just delete the extra stuff because it's unneeded shapes and overhead. So we'll get rid of the extra graphics and just leave big as just the plain circle. And let's go back to Rock 1. We have all the numbers that we need. So to measure these things, we would use an ABS, but before we do that, we have to make so that that big graphic is getting applied. So let's apply the big graphic first. We'll need some variables for that. We'll make a variable, well, for this sprite only, and we'll call it costume number. So costume num. We'll go set costume number. We'll set the costume number to the costume number. So we come into move, we set the costume number to costume number, and then we'll switch the costume to the big costume. So now we're in the big costume when we move, and then we'll switch costume to the variable costume number. So no matter which costume number we're in, it will get remembered and switch back to. So if it's a large rock, it'll switch back to a small rock. So now we want to put these to work to get our wrap so that our rock will go from one side to the other. So what we'll do is we'll use the ABS value. So this will work for a minus or a positive number, all the same. So we'll use the ABS of X and Y to determine if they're on an edge. So this is the threshold for the X value and the threshold for the Y value. We'll get a couple of if statements. And let's switch the costume after this comparison. So let's just move that aside for now, and let's go duplicate this. We'll go if the ABS value is greater than that or this, then do the other thing, and then we'll switch the costume back to the costume number. So if the value is going off of that edge, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set X or set Y. We'll set it to X position and Y position multiplied by -1. So we'll just go -1. We can duplicate that. We'll drop that into here and that into here. We'll get the X position, we'll duplicate it and drop it into there. And drop the Y position into here. And that should just reverse which side that they're on. And that should get us wrapping. So now we have rocks that can come through the other side. Perhaps they're a little bit slow. Like when it comes to the smaller rocks, they're going to spend a little more time in the edge. So we might want to toy with these values and reduce them a little bit. It would cause the big rock to not quite go off of the edge and kind of pop out of existence when we can still see it. So a person would have to decide how they want that to work. So the next thing is to be able to shoot some stuff. So shooting stuff, let's start with the rocket. So we have a very basic script here, and so it's clicked, it's hidden, it changes into its costume, its size is set, and it moves to an appropriate layer. When it starts as a clone, it goes to the ship, points in the direction of the ship, shows itself, and then we get to the sketchy part, repeat until. So repeat until is a little bit sketchy for something for a game. So we'd probably want to change that to a forever. So forever, move 10 steps, delete the clone under certain conditions. So if we're touching the edge, and we're going to add in an or. So if we're touching the edge, or we're touching a rock, we want to delete. So if we're touching an edge or we're touching a clone, delete this clone, otherwise move 10 steps and change the costume. So something like that. So now we should be able to disappear when we touch a rock. Okay, so that's happening. The rocks are no longer going through the rock. But that's too simple. That's just not going to work out. And we'll have a look at why that is. So after we move, we would have the rock check. Am I touching a rocket? So we want to be able to check if we are detecting, if we're sensing touching a rocket. We'll pop that in right there. And we'll just use stop all. So this will make clear what's going on. So we'll start things up. We'll shoot. We're hitting that rock. The rocket is disappearing. But it's not stopping all. What? So things have an order that they happen in. The ship script runs, the rocket ship runs, and then the rock script runs. So if the rocket's going, oh, I'm touching a rock, and just making itself disappear, how's the rock ever going to know that a rocket touched it? So the order that things happen in matters. So if we went over to the rocket and we went, okay, let's pop this out and play. Oh, now it stops. Stops pretty reliably too, because the rocket isn't disappearing. So we probably need more than this. And what we want to do is we want to cause it to cycle around. So we're going to put in a variable. We're going to call the variable for this sprite only. We'll call it cycle count. So we're going to do a cycle count. When the script starts, we'll set the cycle count to 0. If I'm touching an edge or I'm touching a rock, if the cycle count is equal to 1, delete this clone. Else, change cycle count by 1. So this is going to change how everything works, and at this point, the rocket ship should cycle around 1 time before the rocket disappears itself. So now when we shoot, we're getting a limited success on that. So that missed the first time. That hit the rock. It didn't disappear. So let's just get an idea for the reliability here. So one time it seemed like it didn't work, but we're seeming to get good reliability. So we'll just test that for a little bit to get an idea. Maybe the first time was a bit of an anomaly. No, that time we ran into an issue. I'd imagine the issue comes into play when the rock is moving away from us. So let's deliberately pick on rocks moving away from us. So let's see. Well, we seem to have really good reliability, and I wouldn't want to rock the boat on that. So that looks like it's working fairly good with that 1 cycle count. So now we want to look at what happens when it's touching a rocket. So there's a few different conditions here. There's, if I'm touching a rocket and if my costume number is equal to 3. So there's if our costume number equals 3. So that's up here, costume number equals 3. So 3 is the smallest rock. So when the smallest rock gets hit, it should disappear. Let's move initialize rock up. We'll just put this up here because we'll be building down here. So if the costume number equals 3, variables, we want to change rocks by -1. So we'll subtract a rock. And we'll want to delete that clone. So if I'm touching a rocket and I'm a number 3, delete this clone. And this could potentially be an else, but I don't see that it actually needs to be an else. So from here, we'll create a new block, run without screen refresh, we'll call it break. So this is the part where we want to break our rocks. Okay. So let's see, so we're going to break our rock. So what are we going to need to know to break our rock? If I'm a rock number this or that. So let's see. If costume number, we'll duplicate this whole thing, and we'll duplicate this whole thing. Now, the order matters here. So if I'm a costume number, if I was to start at 1 and go, oh, if I'm a costume number, break down into costume number 2. And then I was to check, oh, if I'm a costume number 2, then break down into costume number 3. I would be going in the wrong order, because a costume number 1 would turn into a 2 and would meet the second condition. So we're going to start with costume number 2 and then check for costume number 1. So we'll check in a backwards order so we're not changing a rock into the next condition. So if I'm a costume number 1, let's not copy that one, let's copy this one, switch costume, and switch costume. So we're going to switch from costume number 2 to costume number 3, or from costume number 1 to costume number 2. From here, what we want to do, we'll do that afterwards. First off, we'll just create clones. So we'll create clones. So in this condition, we're going to create 2 clones. Whoa, that's crazy. What's going on there? Boink. We got some madness happening. It's from clicking on the script and having the costume in the big bubble. So it never went through the flag clicked to change itself. So with this one, we're going to create 2 clones. So a big rock is going to turn into 3 medium rocks. A medium rock is going to turn into 4 small rocks. So let's stop that. We're just accidentally creating things and running things by running this. Okay, so let's see what that does. Okay, we're not breaking, we're not breaking, we're not breaking. So why are we not breaking? Because we didn't put in our block to call the function. So we need to make the function call. So we call this make a block, but really what it is, technically it's called a function. So if we get this into the right part, so it's touching a rocket. If it was a small rock, it disappeared, so it never made it here. Otherwise, it made it here, and it looked to see, am I costume number 2? If so, turn into costume number 3 and make some clones to avoid turning it into costume number 2 and meeting the condition twice. So if these were reversed, what would happen is one rock would end up breaking down into rock number 3s every single time. So now we should get rocks breaking. And I don't see any evidence of double shots, because if double shots were happening, one rock would be breaking down into 3 pieces. Now that one broke down badly. So I'm not sure why that one broke down that badly. Let's just see the reliability here. So it looks pretty reliable that it's breaking into the right amount of pieces. And we seem to be pretty reliable on our hitting too. So let's see if we end up with any hidden rocks, or we can get right down to 0. So we're down to 5. We'll work on my aiming. And we're down to 1 rock. We made it down to 0 rocks. So let's get rid of that number. What's that rocket cycle count? So that's over here. We don't want that showing. We just want to see how many rocks there are. So we'll try that one more time. We'll see how things break down. Now, one thing that's going wrong here that would probably increase the difficulty a little bit and make it a little bit better is after we break, let's see, when I start as a clone, but before I enter in the forever loop. So maybe at initialize rock, this is the place to go. So we're initializing a rock, and that rock is not a costume number 1. So if not costume equals 1. So if not the costume number equals 1, we want to do something extra. So the extra thing we want to do is we're going to go point in a random direction, duplicate, so we'll point in a random direction between minus 180 and 180. 180. And then we'll go change X by, change Y by, pick random number, from, I don't know, let's go 10 to 20. And we'll try 10 to 20 and see how that works. So when a rock gets initialized and it's not a number 1 rock, it will cause it to bounce outwards, hopefully. So we're looking for a little bit of outward bounce on the pieces. So we got a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. We got random directions. Let's try increasing this 15 to 20. We don't want the ceiling to be too high, but we don't want the floor to be too low. So let's try a little bit higher. Let's try 25 and 25. Just to see an effect. So those broke up fairly wide, and it worked better with smaller ones. I don't know why that one shattered so badly. Yeah, we seem to be getting some severe shattering now. There's the occasional rocket hit that doesn't explode the rock, but the reliability is pretty good. So that's looking pretty close. I'm not sure on that one that shattered completely into little bits. That was a bit weird. But they seem to be mostly breaking up the way that we'd want them to. Maybe there's times when the random are equaling each other and it's causing some strangeness. But overall, they seem to be breaking pretty reasonably in the way that we want them to. So they're kind of popping apart. And when they pop apart like that, it makes it a little less easy to ambush them all. So we might actually want to increase that number a little bit. Let's try 20 to 30 and just see how that looks. 20, 30. We'll just try it out. So those seem okay. And we'll just do some shooting here to get an idea. And let's see, we have one rock left. It's just loitering. So at the 10 degrees, there's times when it can be hidden a little bit longer. I think this is a pretty reasonable result. There's room for refining it, but it looks like a fairly reasonable result. Yeah, it could probably stand a little bit of refining, maybe on how much they pop apart. There's also reason to go, we can duplicate this, and we can make this apply to this one. So we duplicate that there, and if we duplicate it here, we'll probably get a little more result. So yeah, sometimes they're popping a little bit too far now. So those numbers, they could use some adjusting still. I would say that they're too high, probably at both sides, and that the 15 and 25 was probably the limit for that. So I would change those back to 15 and 25. And then there's probably room to be spent playing around with speeds also a bit to get a little more what we're looking for there. The popping is a little bit far apart. It's a little bit exaggerated. I think that this one was too much, and that made it visually too obvious that it's happening with none of them staying stable. So the rest is probably going to come into toying around with maybe making some speed changes possible. And probably varying the speed a little bit more. And varying the speed a little bit more would probably be so easy as going 1.0 and 2.5. So now it has decimal options. So we get things have sped up quite a bit here. And is probably a little bit more gameplay like. So that'll be it for this video. In the next video, we're going to put in some explosions. When the explosions are in, we might be able to change this to work a little bit better. Yeah, maybe we need to play around with the direction number as well, because maybe the direction number would help to make things work a little bit better. But yeah, in the next video we'll get the explosions going on and then see how that works out. And until then, I hope this was helpful, and take care.